All right, we're going to go ahead and get started today. Welcome, and thank you for joining our class on Unreal Engine 5. My name is Jessica, and I'm a library services representative with the Plano Public Library. We're also joined by Priyanka, who will be moderating any questions we get in the chat. Before we begin, I'm going to let you guys know some ground rules that we've set up for the program. Our virtual attendees will be muted, and your video will be blocked. During the program, you're only going to see my screen. At the top of the screen, you can find an exit full screen option if you need to get to other things on your computer. You're welcome to ask questions or request that I repeat information at any time during today's program. You can use the chat or the Q&A feature available in Zoom to ask your questions. You should see them at the bottom of your screen. We're going to repeat all the questions that we received so that everyone has the context of that question before we move on. And then a recording of this program will be available in a few days on our YouTube channel. So if you are unable to follow along today and you want to follow along later, that will be available to you. Additionally, we do have captions available for this presentation. You should be able to enable captions at the bottom of your screen. Right, I saw some questions were already popping into chat. Oh, it's people saying hello. Hello, everybody. All right. Okay. One final note as we get started today. I'm going to remind you guys that I am not a subject matter expert. The information we're sharing today is designed to be an overview and help you get started with Unreal Engine 5. At the end of the class, we will share some additional resources and classes to allow you to learn more. All right, so let's get started. There we go. So the goal for today's class is to get an overview of Unreal Engine 5. We're first going to explain what Unreal Engine is, and then outline some terminology, and then afterwards we will do a short demonstration in the software. So, what is Unreal Engine 5? Unreal Engine is a game engine, which is a software used for making video games. There are lots of different game engines available, each with different strengths. Unreal Engine is a great tool for making 3D games or games that involve lots of physics. That said, it is very versatile, so it can be used to make almost any type of game. While it's possible to make a game without using a game engine, using software like Unreal Engine makes the process easier by taking care of some of the work that the game designer would otherwise have to do. For example, it makes games that you make in the software more portable. A game that you make on a Windows computer without a game engine would require a lot of extra work to run on an Apple computer or a gaming console or a smartphone. So Unreal Engine does a lot of the background work to make that easier to transfer to different platforms, as a lot of the background programming for that development. It is also very good for visualization and testing. So it very quickly lets you see what a change does. Without a game engine, the game designer would need to make their change, compile the change, which the bigger the game is, the longer that takes, and then actually run the game each time that you wanted to test a change. With a game engine, you're able to basically hit a play button, and then you're able to see what the change is, and you're able to, like, if you're creating an environment, you can visually see the environment in the space instead of looking at a bunch of lines of code. Ultimately, Unreal Engine is doing a lot of background work to make games run easily and make it easier for a person to work on the game. In particular, Unreal Engine has a built-in physics engine which simulates real-world physics, and some very good built-in lighting systems, which makes it a great choice for making 3D games that require realistic gravity or look really realistic. Now, there are some system requirements for Unreal Engine. So to access the Unreal Engine software, you do have to download the Epic Games launcher, because Epic is the company that creates Unreal Engine. So if you have that launcher, you're then able to install it. To install it, you need a Windows 10 computer or a Mac OS of 12.5 or more recent. You'll also need at least 30 gigabytes of storage and 8 gigabytes of RAM. While the actual engine will take up about 30 gigabytes on your computer, there are many extra resources. For example, the save file of the project that you're working on, any asset packs, etc., that can take up more space if you choose to install them as well. The initial storage space, the initial download also may require a bit more than 30 gigs to install on your computer. So you do want to plan ahead and make sure that the computer you're trying to install Unreal Engine on has enough space for the software. We also have Unreal Engine 5 installed at the digital creation spaces at the Harrington, Haggard, and Parr libraries, so you can try the software out and work on projects there as well. If you will need to create your own 3D models, then a 3D modeling software like Maya, Blender, or Tinkercad will be needed as well, though Unreal does have several options for finding pre-made models, which we will discuss a bit later. You do not have to code when you're using Unreal Engine. When we demonstrate some basics of the engine later, we're going to be messing with Blueprints, which is Unreal's visual coding script. So we're not going to actually be using any other software or any coding. However, if you want to code, you would need to have your own code editing software. There are several ways that you can use Unreal Engine 5. It's primarily used and is created for making video games. It's a very popular choice, especially for companies that create AAA games, which are games with very large budgets and lots of people on the team and want the game to look realistic. Unreal Engine 5 can also be used to create other things as well, including animation, CGI, so visual effects on top of real life acting. And then there are some industry uses as well, such as mocking up items for manufacturing or simulating a building for architects. Did we have a question?
Yeah, we have a question from Vanessa. What coding language does Unreal use?
I believe it uses C++. Yes. Unreal Engine uses C++.
Thanks.
Yes. Okay. We are going to go over some brief vocabulary before we get started on the demo. There's a couple of things that I'm going to refer to, and knowing this vocabulary will help things be a little bit less confusing in a minute. First, we're going to talk about assets. Those are all the different objects or media that you can upload or manipulate in your project. These can be imported from outside sources or sometimes can be built within Unreal Engine. This includes 3D models, music files, any video files, some outside code, etc. Next is levels. This can also be referred to as maps sometimes. A level is a gameplay area that defines what a player can see and interact with. This includes environments, assets, other characters, geometry, pawns, actors, all together. Everything in the game is in the level. Multiple levels can be loaded into the world to create a seamless experience when the game is actually running. But in Unreal Engine, the games are saved level by level, and breaking up areas into levels helps make it so whoever's playing the game doesn't have to load the entire game at once on their computer. They can just load a chunk of it, which helps the game run smoother and faster. One last thing is objects. Unreal Engine will also refer to objects as actors. They are instances of an asset. So you have one copy of the asset that you've imported into the project, but then you can make as many copies of that asset as you want, and they're all their own object or actor. And you can make changes to each individual one without changing the base asset that you imported. All right, we are going to switch over to Unreal Engine. Were there any questions about this informational portion of the presentation?
Not so far.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see. Yeah, top engine. So right here on the once you have downloaded Unreal Engine from the Epic Games Store and you open up Unreal Engine, this is the view that you get when you are creating a new project. If you don't have Unreal Engine installed already and you're wanting to follow along, because it is such a large download, you are probably not going to have time for that in this presentation. Again, a recording of this presentation will be going up on YouTube in a couple of days, so you can go back and follow along then. But we've launched Unreal Engine. We're going to make a new project. All right, so give me one moment. Okay, so we're going to start a new project. Over here on the left, we have different types of projects. So if you wanted to do a mock-up for a different type of project, you absolutely can. But we are going to focus on games because that's what we're here for today. In the third person, we are going to choose the third person template, which has some preloaded environments and characters set up. We're also going to have on the side here blueprints as our option for our programming method. And then we're going to check the starter content box so that some extra assets are included that we're able to insert later. Okay, and then we want to make sure that the project is saved to the location that we want it saved in the bottom left. Make sure it's saved with the name that we want. So Unreal Basics. It can't have space. Yes?
We have a question. Should we go ahead and make a project as we continue to follow along with the library presentation?
If you want to follow along, you absolutely can start a new project. Yes. I was just saying that if someone hasn't already downloaded Unreal Engine, it's going to, the process of the download will probably take 20 minutes. So if you have it, please follow along. And then if you don't, that's fine because we will have a recording later. All right, so we've set up where we're going to save it and our name. Starter content is checked, blueprint is on, we're going to hit create. And then it's going to load. And once the project has loaded, it's going to pull up the default view for creating a game. So in this big window on the left here is the preview window. It has a view of what the game currently looks like. At the top, it has some play, pause buttons. So we're able to test the game as we add things. But if the play button is active, like if I click on this play button, if I made any changes in the environment, they wouldn't save right now. The game has to be stopped for it to work, for it to save the changes. So you're going to want to make sure you save your changes while the game isn't running. On the top right here, we have the outliner, which lists all of the objects, all the actors that are currently in the game, in the level. It lets you pick out different copies, like if we want to pick a different cube, we're able to click on that and select different chunks of the environment if you know what the name is. Depending on Skipped ahead. You can also group objects together. If you see those folders, you're able to group them together so that you can manipulate them, all the objects together at the same time. Then we have details in the bottom here. It's empty when nothing is selected. If you've clicked on an object, then it'll give you some options on how to manipulate it, and we'll touch on a little bit of those later. And then on the bottom, the absolute bottom, we have the content drawer. This little button here, if we click on that, it pops up and it includes all of the assets that have been added to the project. So these aren't things that are necessarily in the game right now. These are things that we have the option to add to the game. Any questions about just the layout of Unreal or anything we've covered so far?
No, not yet.
All right. So once we've got our project pulled up, we are able to look around the preview window. If you click and drag your mouse left or right, you're able to pivot at the point where the camera already is. You can both left and right click work for that. You're able to zoom in and out using the scroll wheel. And then if you want to have a little bit more 3D movement, you're able to Alt and then right click, and that will also zoom. If you don't have a scroll wheel, the alternative is Alt, right click. In the preview window, you're going to notice a few different icons at the top right of the screen. Up here, we're going to use these different tools on these blue boxes to show you what they do. First one is the basic select object. It lets you click on an object, and then you'll see it highlight in the outliner, and you'll see its details come up in the details section. So if you click on this, it changed to that other cube. And if we click on this, it clicks that part of the environment. The next icon has these arrows going up, down, left, and right. This is one of the transform tools. So if we click on something, it gives these options of arrows that we can move on the X, Y, or Z axis. So up, down, left, right, and then in and out. And if we click on an arrow and drag, we are able to lift it up into the air. We're able to put that wherever we want. The next icon is two arrows kind of pointing at each other in a circle. This is the rotate tool. It changes, we don't have arrows anymore. Now we have these curves. And if we click on a curve and rotate it, it rotates the shape based on the degrees that we rotate it on that circle. Okay. And then the final one is the scale tool. This little square with an arrow pointing out of it. And this lets you stretch different sides of it, make it a longer shape, a wider shape, skinnier shape. Lets you change the proportions of the shape that you are manipulating. Now, you are able to do all those things, but sometimes you don't want to just visually stretch it. You need it to be like a specific size, or you want it to be perfectly square still. Down here in the details, you're able to do location, which is where the object starts, rotation, and scale. So when I stretched out the cube, I messed up the scale. It's no longer 1 to 1 to 1. It's not a cube anymore. But if I click in here, change the values in this transform area back to 1, then I've returned it to being a cube. And then if we lock it, then that will maintain the ratio. And so they all change the same amount. Okay, now that we can move objects around, we're going to add some new objects to this template. It's looking kind of boring. The top left corner of the workspace, there's this square with a plus symbol. This lets us add new things to the project. So once we click, it gives us a drop down. If we have more content on our computer that we want to add, we can hit import content and it'll pull up the window to find things from the computer. We'll go over Quixel Bridge and the Unreal Marketplace a little bit more in a moment, but these are two other ways that you can find existing assets to add to your project. And then the content browser is basically your content drawer that we looked at earlier. So that pulls up all of the existing things that you have access to. But sometimes when you're making a game, you don't want to jump straight to using the really fancy assets that you found. For example, this template is a bunch of squares. And if we made it all pretty and then decided, oh, we need a way bigger space or we need a way smaller space, if we put in all the fancy assets already, then you have to redo a lot of work. So sometimes it can be helpful to white box or just put in a rough draft of the shape of your level, basically, to start out with and then make it pretty later. So we're going to insert some shapes. Was there a question? I saw it pop up.
No.
Okay. Then we will continue on. For shapes, we're going to work with some more cubes as an example, but you can see that there are some other options, like the sphere and the cylinder. So I clicked the cube and we've added a cube.
There's a
So we
question
can,
now. There's a question now.
yes.
Is there a way to change the dimensions for multiple objects at once?
Let's see. So
Don't need an explanation of how to do it. Just want to know if it's possible.
let's see if we're able to select. It looks like it. So if you select a bunch of objects that are the same, then you're able to look at all of the transforms at the same time, and they should rotate at the same time. Also, if you change the base asset, then that change would reflect to all the other ones. Okay, and then we got this cube. It's our new cube here. We're going to move this into the space. It kind of popped really close to us. That's not going to be useful when we're actually in this space testing it. So let's move this down. There we go. The cube is going to float wherever we leave it. By default, physics does not automatically apply to new objects you've included. So the cube is static or fixed, which is an option down here somewhere. There's simulate physics. Where's the movement? Up at top, that's near the top. It's also possible that things have moved. Outlier. So we'll go ahead and hit play just to see what this cube does. You see our first cube, that the one that the game is included, fell down. But our white cube that we inserted has not moved because physics is not enabled on it yet. So we're able to, we've got the cube selected. There we go. Underneath the transforms, we have mobility, and static is the default. So this makes static a great setting for things like walls and floors, things that you don't want to move while the game is actually running. Okay, stationary is a similar setting. It lets the game be changed, but still not move. So if we had some code that moved it, like a moving platform, or if it is something that the player collects and then it disappears, you're able to mark it as stationary and that it will be able to be changed by things in the game. And then finally, there's a movable, which will allow the shape to be moved. Now, even if it's set to movable, I still haven't checked physics, so it should still float. It's still floating. To make the cube fall, we would need to go to physics in the details section and check simulate physics. So now, if I hit play, the cube has fallen down. And we're able to walk over here and the player can move it around. Okay. For planes, it's the one different shape in the shape that you can insert. Planes are interesting because they're only visible from one side. So you can see them down here. You can see that it is visible from the top, but it is not visible from the bottom. It kind of just disappears. So you could theoretically use a plane for like a moving platform, but it is a little odd. Usually planes are used for things like the absolute floor of the level or walls the player isn't supposed to get behind. Because if you're not supposed to get behind those walls, then you don't need a back. But they don't, like if we make physics apply to a plane, it's just going to fall onto the ground, and it will sometimes glitch if you step on it. So generally, planes would be static, and you wouldn't apply physics to them, but they're an option. But all these cubes that we've been messing with are really boring and plain. If we want to change the look of the boxes, we can use materials. Some materials are included in the starter content. So if we make this a little bit taller, if we go to the materials folder, we have a bunch of different ways that these cubes can look. Let's see. There are two ways you can apply a material to an object. You can, there's a material option down here in the details while you've got something selected. So if we select this cube, they've chosen this blue material. We don't like that. We want it to be wood. And now we've changed the material and it looks different. The other way to do it is if we click on this one here, we open the content drawer. We have all our ones. We want this one to be gold. Let's make this gold. Drag and drop. Now that cube is gold. So there's a couple different ways that you can make different shapes, different colors, which can be very helpful for when you're white boxing, just helping keep track of which boxes are intended to be things like houses or trees. It just helps you organize your space a little bit more. So if we make the ground grass. Oh. Let's make the ground grass. Can I find the grass? Grass. And now the ground is a different color. That said, no matter how many materials you add and how nice your level looks, you're not going to be able to see it if there's no light in your game. So now we're going to go into lighting next. Was there any questions about inserting shapes or materials?
No, Jessica.
No? All right. So then we're going to do lighting next. All levels must have some lighting element or your game will be pitch dark. There are several types of lighting and they all have slightly different uses. They're going to be in the same insert menu that we did to add shapes. Right above it is lights. First one is directional light. And in this third person template, by default, there is already a directional light. So if we look over here in this corner, they've stuck the directional light over here. And we can also go find it in our outliner. We've got our directional light in the lighting folder. You really only need one in a level. So if you accidentally deleted it from your outliner or your game, you could insert one using lights, directional light. It's kind of the ambient environmental light that exists. it lights up the whole level the same way. As a result, if you move it around, nothing changes. So we've moved it. This dot is not like the origin point of the sun. It's just the lighting in the level overall. So moving it around doesn't change anything. It's just a matter of it being in a convenient spot for you to find. However, if you rotate it, then you can change the angle that the sun is coming from. So if we rotate this here, you can make it so it's like noon, it's like straight down, or we can make the shadows really deep, like it's the sunset. And if we go too far, now we can't see anything. So you're able to adjust the angle of the light from rotating it. And then if we go down here, the options, you're able to change the light color. So if we want it to be a more moody lighting, we can choose a blue or a purple or a red if there's some disaster or something. And then you're also able to change the brightness, which is the intensity. So we can make it really bright or really dim. So this gives us a general level of light throughout the whole game, but if you want light only in specific places, or like if your game takes place inside, or if you want a bit more light in a specific area, there are a few options to give us more local light. One of the biggest ones is the point light. So if we go to lights, we insert a point light, and we're going to move this point light down so we can see where that's and this one, moving it lets you change where that light is localized. And then if we move it close to a wall, we can see that it is lighting up the area around it. It has a limited but adjustable range. So that would be the attenuation radius. You can see this line right here. That's the big circle that is like the maximum amount of light reach. We make it bigger over here. We can make it really far, or we can make it smaller. And we can change the intensity as well. Make it a brighter light, a dimmer light. Can change the color again. And you can click off whether it makes shadows or not. So if it will light other things, or if there was a shape in a way, if it would ignore that or not. And the other two lights we have over here are very similar. We have the spotlight, which is very similar to the point light, except it's like you stuck a cone over the point light. So its range is a bit restricted. So if we rotate this one, we can change where it's aiming. And you can see how it, instead of being a perfect circle, is now like an oval. Whereas if we rotate the point light, it's not going to do much. If we rotate this, that does nothing because it's affecting all the areas around it the same way. But the spotlight can be rotated and have it changed. Once again, it has the intensity, and it has the light color, and it has the radius, so it can be bigger or smaller. And then the rect light, which is our last lighting option, is similar to the spotlight. Not that one, this one. Except its origin point is a rectangle. So like if it could be a TV screen. Say there's a TV screen over here. Now you can see that like hard line where it's being interrupted by like the casing of the TV. And then we can change the color. It'd be like a blue cast that you get when you're watching a television, things like that. So if you have a square shaped origin for your light, you can use a rect light. Every game project is going to have different needs in terms of lighting. You can use any number and combination of lights to change how a player sees the level. For example, you could have a directional light for outside of a building, but lots of point lights inside so the player can see where they're going. or there could be no directional light, but lots of spotlights to let the player see only specifically what you show them. You can get very creative with it. Okay, any questions on lighting?
If you have a question,
Mhm.
could you make a single light source like a torch, copy it and put it in different areas and adjust as needed?
Yes, so if you, let's find the spotlight again. So if we decided we want more copies of this spotlight and then like we want to change the rotation, we can just right click, the duplicate button, let's see. I just click it, Control C, Control V. Yes, so if we copy it and then paste it, we now have two in the same spot. You can move it over, and then you could move that new copy to a different location and change its rotation. And it doesn't affect the original. So if we rotate this, the original didn't rotate, just the one you chose did. And that could also be done with all the cubes that we've done. That is not a specific thing with lights. Any object that you have inserted, you could make a copy of and move somewhere else. All right. So everything we've covered so far can help us make a level, but for it to move from an environment to a playable space, we need to make things interactive. In Unreal Engine 5, this can be done using blueprints. So what blueprints are, it's the visual scripting system for Unreal 5. Blueprints allow things in the game to interact with each other and cause things to happen based on player input or other factors. Unreal works using the programming language C++, and games can be coded using that language, but because the blueprint system is visual, you can connect different components visually instead of writing lines of code that do the same thing. There's a lot that you can do with blueprints, but we will look at just some of the basics here today. Starting with an example of a blueprint. So the player, which is an available asset, and it loads in every time that I hit the game, hit the play button. So if we hit play, there's the player. But the player isn't actually in the game at the beginning of the game. There's only like a spawn point for the player. That's why you're not seeing the player. You're seeing this little control in the start flag. So to access the player, we're going to go into the content drawer. I'm going to go to blueprints. Let's see, where are you? Characters. There we go. Third person, blueprint, third person. Okay, so the third person blueprint is hiding in the third person folder, which is the one that has all the assets that came with the third person template. The rest of these are from the starter content, which is why I used. So we're gonna go ahead and click on that third person character, double click, and now we've pulled up the blueprint editor. There's a lot going on here, so we're gonna break it down. It lets us view all the different information on the existing blueprint. First, we have the viewport, which lets you see the blueprint as it exists. Each box is an event. So like input will let you like if an X is pressed, if a Y is pressed. See, so we're on the event graph. I'm silly. This is the event graph. It lets you see all different events that are happening. The viewport is over here, and it lets you look at the player as it exists. Okay, and over here we have the compile button. If you've made changes to the event graph, and it doesn't work, if you hit the compile button, it will yell at you. We have a green check because currently our code is all good, but if we say, if we manage to disconnect something and it like isn't connected to anything, then it may throw a compile error at me. And then it isn't going to let you save something that just doesn't work. If something would crash the game if you left it like that, it's not going to compile and it's not going to let you save. Speaking of save, in this top left corner, we have the save button, which will let you save any changes you make to the blueprint. but it only changes the blueprint. It does not change the level at large. We're going to talk about saving a little bit more in just a moment. There's also the construction tab. Sometimes things need to happen just once, and they happen when the asset is created. That would be a script that you'd want to run when it is constructed in the game. So that's where that is. So because the player isn't in the game at the beginning, it does not have a construction script. Okay.
Jessica, we have a
Yes.
question.
Mhm.
Can you load a different character instead of the silver person?
So it is possible. I do not currently have another character prepared to insert today. We could probably insert a double. But if we did that, the game may get confused about which person is controlled with like the keyboard inputs. So I will test that at the end and see what it does. But we're not going to do it right now because I don't want to break the game. And then you're able to see all of the different components that the blueprint is touching here. So if we click on the blue third-person character, you're able to see all of its mesh, its material. We could change the material here. And a bunch of things about physics, clothing, lighting, animation, stuff like that. There's a lot going on with this third-person character. All right. And if we scroll down to character movement, which should be down here somewhere. There's character movement. Character movement, general settings. We can adjust how the character moves in the game. We can make the gravity less intense. So it's like we're on the moon. We can make it so they really heavy. We can change the walking speed. Let's say we want them to be really fast. Yes, so it went from 500 to 1600. So we'll save that. You'll see it was a question mark while it was loading. Compile. It compiled well with those changes. We'll hit save, and then we're gonna minimize this so we can see how that game plays now that we've made those changes. We've got the character here. If I jump really high because we lowered the gravity. If I walk, there's a max acceleration that I didn't adjust, but you can go really fast because I messed with the speed to make it let them go faster. And because the speed is so uncoupled from the friction that lets you stop, the player kind of slides to a stop. Okay, so if we open up the content drawer again, and we'll open up this person again, we instead made it max acceleration down to like 100. We'll compile that, save that, and then we'll run again, and you'll be able to see that this change has made our character now really slow. They're not able to pick up a very speed very quickly at all. Okay. So that was us messing with a blueprint a little bit. Now we're going to save the project. So we haven't done this yet. We saved the blueprint so it would take effect, but we have not saved the project yet. You want to save frequently to make sure you don't lose progress. If, for example, if Unreal runs into a problem and the software crashes, anything you haven't saved goes away. So you want to make sure that you are saving individual files you manipulate as well as the whole project. So on the top left, there is a floppy disk here. It'll save the current level you're working on. It will not save if you have an asset open. So if we had like the blueprint open, we hadn't saved a change there. Saving the level would not save the blueprint. To make sure that you are saving everything that you have changed, you go to File and Save All. So that saves all of the changes that you've made. And then if you were finished with the game, if you go to, let's see, where are you? Under platforms here, you're able to mess with the, you choose the platform that you want to export to, and then you're able to go into the settings for those projects and customize them for the end result you want. So we're not going to go into that today just because there's a lot of different platforms that you can export to, and there's a lot of settings. But again, we'll be referring you guys to some guides and more projects who should help you be able to set that up. We'll also be directing you to Unreal Engine's website where they have both professionals who work on the game engine itself, as well as people who use Unreal Engine for a living, who have different changes that they can make. I mean, what changes you would make to the project settings to export the game. Okay, are there any final questions before I hand you guys those resources and then see if inserting a second person breaks the game? Any questions? Okay, not seeing any questions.
I also would say that you can raise your hands and I'll unmute you if you have a question. This is to the participants. Thank you, Jess.
All right, I'm gonna put some resources in the chat. First, we've got the Unreal Engine website. We're also able to look at where is the development documentation. So a bunch of information about how the game engine works. And then also, if you have a Plano library card, under our Research and Learn tab on the City of Plano website, you have access to two online learning platforms, LinkedIn Learning and Udemy. And they will, they have lots of different classes on many different types of software, but they both have classes on Unreal Engine 5. There are also some other classes that are available for free on different platforms like YouTube. That said, if you are using a free tutorial like that, you do want to check and see what version of the software they are using, because as Unreal Engine is updated, things change, things move around, different things become possible in different ways, other things become impossible or obsolete. There are better ways to do it. So you do want to check and make sure that it is Unreal Engine 5, because Unreal Engine 4 also exists and is way different. And then just check and see if the version that you are working in is similar to the version that the other person is. It doesn't necessarily need to be the same version, but you do want it to be kind of close so that there isn't any wild change that you're missing. Okay. All right. And then we're going to see what happens if I insert another character. Let's see. We insert. I'm not sure if dragging this in will it work? Okay. There's a second player in the game. All right, so I'll hit the play button and see what happens. Okay, we've added a player. Now, if I start walking, do they also start walking? No. Okay. So by default, the one that's hooked up is the one that stays hooked up, and you're able to just add more players to the game. So in theory, you could probably set up some code to have multiplayer, have more than one player walking around, but it would require different inputs. All right, jump back to PowerPoint. Become back. Okay. And then if you were going to make your own 3D models for Unreal. You could also use some 3D modeling software like Blender, Tinkercad, or Maya Autodesk. And they, Blender and Tinkercad are both something that you could mess around with the DCS in the digital creation spaces at the library as well. Are there any final questions before we wrap this program up?
I don't have any questions yet.
All right.
Oh, yes. We will get another invite through email. This is for what? I'm going to unmute you. You can ask your question, James.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just trying to see, is this going to be a series that you're going to be offering?
No, currently we only have our Unreal Engine 5 basics. But again, there are very long tutorials and classes on Udemy and LinkedIn Learning for learning Unreal Engine 5.
Okay, so this was a standalone meeting today.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
But
thank
if you
you.
want, but if you did want to review it, if there's something that we said that you wanted to look back on, recording of the class will be on YouTube in a couple of days as well.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Right. Any final questions?
Well, doesn't look like it.
All right. We'll go ahead and hang out for a little bit longer just to give people time to pull the links from the chat. But otherwise, we'll quiet down and
Yeah.
we'll just wind down. Thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate you guys coming to our presentation on Unreal Engine 5.
Erica says it was a great presentation. Jessica, thank you so much.
And thank you all for coming.